and welcome to the first episode of my show, Combat Evolution, where I go in-depth on a game's combat mechanics and its sequel, and determine which game has the better combat. Since there's only one game in everyone's mind right now, and probably the perfect place to start this show, I'll be talking about the Witcher series, starting from Witcher 2 to Witcher 3. After contemplating a long time on whether to judge Witcher 2 with its most updated version or with the full combat rebalance mod, I decided to use the mod, mainly because I believe the mod improves the combat and the fact it was made by someone on the development team. Even with the mod on, Witcher 2 still plays the same, so this overview can still be used regarding the unmodded vanilla version. Lastly, I played The Witcher 2 on PC using a controller with dark difficulty and Witcher 3 on PS4 with Death's March difficulty. So without further ado, let's get started. Swords, magic, barrel rolls. Lots of barrel rolls. The Witcher 2 was a grand first attempt for CD Projekt Red to make a more action-oriented and visceral combat system for their series, and honestly, I feel like they don't get enough recognition for what they achieved with it. It has the basic setup of most action-oriented games with a fast attack, strong attack, dodge, and the dedicated use item button, but what makes The Witcher 2 really unique was that it pushed the player to maximize every little mechanic they put into its combat. When the game first released, there was a lot of complaints of little to no handholding the game was. The first group of enemies you fight on your own was seriously a tough ordeal for a lot of people, as the game really didn't tell you anything and just let you loose. As you fight your first major encounter, you end up just dying and trying something new and then dying again. But that's where The Witcher 2 really shows why its combat is so special. Experimentation. When I first played the game back when it was released, I struggled quite a bit with crowd control and how to deal with 2 or 3 enemies attacking me at once. After failing a couple times, I then played around with the spells and later found out the pretty overpowered Quen spell made handling those mobs much easier. When you start playing around with the different tools The Witcher has, the combat opens up tremendously and becomes tactical. Enemy with the shield blocking all your attacks? Maybe use Ard, The Witcher's force push, to stagger him, opening him up for an attack. 6 enemies coming at you at once? Throw a bomb that spreads gas everywhere and light it with your fire spell, Igni. There really aren't many combat systems that use swordplay, magic, and items as fluently and as tactically as The Witcher does. You're constantly switching to different spells and using items in order to handle all the enemies the game throws at you. And boy does that sword combat feel satisfying. Obviously, fighting a group requires more careful attacks as you dodge incoming ones, but the moment there's only one enemy left, you feel completely overpowered as you deliver an onslaught of slashes that the poor guy just can't defend through. And that brings me to another thing. The Witcher 2 does a great job at making you feel like you're a Witcher. A master swordsman with years of training would absolutely demolish any normal soldier to a one-on-one fight. Even if the enemy has a group advantage, that is really the only advantage they have. A Witcher prepares before he fights. He creates these strategies on dealing with each enemy in every situation. You evolve yourself, learning from your mistakes as the game goes on, and by the end of it, you really do feel like you're an experienced professional monster slayer handling anything that comes your way. That's not to say the combat doesn't have any problems. Quen was absolutely overpowered when the game first launched and made it possible to go through the entire game using only one spell. Because of how overpowered it was, the tactic was usually Quen, attack like a maniac, roll away, and then Quen up again, rinse and repeat. Although they nerfed it later on with the Enhanced Edition where it only takes one attack to end your Quen spell in like 2 or 3, it is still a bit too strong, and I feel like the combat rebalance mod made it much more equal with other spells, as you have to be immobile and are unable to attack in order to use it. It pretty much acts as a counter now instead of oh yeah, I'm gonna put the shield on, then you guys can't do anything to me, so sucks to be you. The dodging in the game also has a little too much invincibility frames where if you just spam that dodge button, you will not get hurt. At all. The targeting while using a controller is pretty unreliable as well, as you would randomly attack an enemy that got a little too close to you when you clearly had your camera set on someone else. Although this problem is mostly fixed if you use a mouse and keyboard, so I would actually recommend to use a mouse and keyboard over a controller when you play this game, mostly because this game is actually tailored more towards mouse and keyboard than it is controller. And also there's this weirdness when holding forward and attacking an enemy where you want to try to get closer to an enemy but end up just slashing the air. This problem is mostly fixed by making sure the target reticle is on the enemy you want to attack and just mashing the button away, as Geralt will automatically lunge at the enemy. However, the absolute worst offender is the invisible walls in the environments you fight in. Too often did I find myself accidentally getting caught in some random terrain and having to maneuver my way out of it while being attacked by a mob of enemies. It really does get annoying when you're trying to dodge an attack and end up getting stuck by an invisible wall. My worst case scenario was I couldn't even attack a guy because a box no bigger than Geralt's shoe was blocking me from him. That said, even with its faults, I absolutely love The Witcher 2's combat and felt they nailed that tactical style combat a Witcher should be known for. Four long years later, we finally get a follow-up with The Witcher 3 being released. How has CD Projekt Red done translating their tactical and dynamic combat into their sequel? After spending roughly 30 hours with the game, I can confidently say that they brought that same tactical and dynamic goodness into The Witcher 3, keeping key aspects such as experimentation and developing your own strategies. However, they also dramatically changed the feel and pace of combat compared to The Witcher 2. In The Witcher 3, swordplay is much more slow-paced. Geralt's movement has been reduced dramatically, where you begin relying on dodges to get you around the battlefield. You also attack much slower, where you won't be doing 5 or 6 slashes in 2 to 3 seconds like you would in Witcher 2. Enemies are much more resilient to your assault, so much so the game punishes you for trying to mash away at an enemy by abruptly ending your attacks and leaving you staggered. In a sense, the swordplay is more realistic this way, as you are more focused on trying to break through your enemy's defenses rather than pummeling them non-stop, trying to get as many hits in before taking any damage. You'll still be relying heavily on dodging a lot like in Witcher 2, but more so on the quick dodge they added rather than the full-on barrel roll, which still has its usefulness, but for certain enemies. Seriously, each fight feels like a struggle as you constantly think of ways to open them up for attacks while trying to handle all the enemies coming at you, which can be overwhelming but really satisfying when you take them all down. Which leads me to another big change from Witcher 2 to Witcher 3, crowd control. In Witcher 2, the way I handled crowd control was by either finding someone alone and taking them out before the others caught up to me, or by using all my magic abilities to disrupt them, such as getting them caught with Erden or using my Igni to burn as many in a clump as possible. The Witcher 3 deals with crowd control in a much more interesting way. At first I tried to handle crowd control like I did in Witcher 2, which worked mostly okay, but I actually found that dealing with crowd control similar to how it's done in the Batman Arkham games was much more effective. Before, I would normally keep attacking one guy until another enemy attacks me, where I would quick dodge and then try to wait for another opening, rinse and repeat. Now after opening a guy's defenses, I'll immediately attack some other enemy to push him back and then return back to the guy I hit. The tactic not only works great, but it feels really amazing to pull off as you create this space that only you control. It also helps that the combat animations are much improved to allow Geralt to attack other targets more fluidly compared to Witcher 2, where you're limited to what your target reticle is on. It's little things like this that make me love this combat system and appreciate that tactical feeling CD Projekt Red was going for. However, just like The Witcher 2, the game has its faults. I felt I had to move the camera a lot more compared to Witcher 2, constantly trying to get a better angle of who I was attacking. Also, swordplay felt a lot more visceral in Witcher 2, where every time I struck an enemy, their reaction and how the camera would shake just enough made it feel exceptionally powerful. The problem with getting stuck on the environment is still here, and in some of the areas of the game, far worse than anything in The Witcher 2, but I feel like that kind of comes with the territory of being an open world game, so I kind of give them an okay pass for that one. Also, I enjoyed the fact that Geralt was a lot more mobile in Witcher 2, whereas Witcher 3 he slows down considerably, making it a bit harder to maneuver around the fight without resorting to constantly quick dodging or barrel rolling to gain distance. I also noticed that while fighting, I relied a little too heavily on backstepping, making me feel like I'm always retreating after every enemy attack, whereas I would be dancing around all my enemies in Witcher 2. Oh yeah, and Gwyn regained its spot as most spam spell since dodging lost a lot of its invincibility frames. Which could be a good or bad thing, it really depends on your preference, but personally I actually really do like it that they didn't give you as many invincibility frames. Except sometimes when I clearly dodged but I still got hit, where that's when you start to feel, oh yeah, now I really wish they put just a little tiny bit more. After taking both these combat systems and putting them to the test, I believe that the game with the better combat system is The Witcher 3! The Witcher 3 made a lot of great improvements to what Witcher 2 established, with further emphasis on strategical combat and polishing up everything else. The better animations, more focus on tactics, and methodical pace make it the combat system The Witcher 2 was trying to accomplish in the first place. The only thing that The Witcher 3 doesn't do as good as The Witcher 2 is the feel of swordplay. Seriously, the combat in Witcher 2 is just so visceral, so gratifying. Sure, the animation was a little janky at times and you had to roll more than the Pillsbury Doughboy had to during Thanksgiving, but it had this unique, very indie feel to it that I really liked. Slashing at an enemy non-stop and having your field of view blur was seriously one of the best feelings. Now if you're wondering which game should you pick up merely on combat, I would honestly say Witcher 3, but pick up both. Both games are great. You should really try both of them, especially, you know, Witcher 2, you can see what they're going for, and then with Witcher 3 you can now see them finally realizing that potential of what they were going for. It's great. Both games are good. Pick both of them up. They're great. Thank you all for watching the first episode of my show. If there's any changes or improvements you guys think I should make, feel free to put them in the comments below. This is the first time I'm doing something like this, and I would love to have any critique to further improve this show for everyone's enjoyment. I have a lot of ideas for new shows and can't wait to get started on them. Again, thanks for watching and take care.